Lesson 1-3, Solving Equations. In this lesson, we are going to solve equations and state restrictions. So to start with, an equation is when two expressions are equal to each other. And a solution is when a value or a set of values are substituted into an equation and it makes the equation true. Now, a solution isn't necessarily always a number. Sometimes it could be another expression. It just depends on the type of equation. To start with, we are going to have a number for our answer. So to solve an equation, we are using the reverse order of operations. So remember, our order of operations is, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So when we simplify, we go this direction. So this is to simplify. When we are solving, it is the opposite. So we're undoing everything. We're going this way. So that means that we start by undoing, adding and subtracting, and then multiplication and division. So keep that in mind as we start our solving process. And then another thing that we need to make sure we know the difference between are the directions simplifying, evaluating, and solving. So remember, simplifying is when you combine like terms. Okay, so combine like terms. Evaluating means to substitute and then simplify. And then solving, we are finding a solution. All right, so let's do some examples of solving. So I have some easy ones, and they're gradually going to get a little bit harder. So when we are solving, if we're looking at all these problems, we are solving for a variable. So that means that we are getting x by itself. So for the first one, to get x alone, so that it's positive, we would need to divide both sides by 3. So we would end up with x equals 4. So 12 divided by 3 is 4. So since x is alone, 4 is our final answer. Okay, again, looking at this, we're trying to get x alone. So that means that we have to get rid of this 2. So since we're adding, we're going to undo that by subtracting 2 to each side. So 8 minus 2 is 6. So x equals 6 will be our final solution. Next one, again, we're getting x. So when we're looking at this, it's multiplication in between these, but we're dealing with a fraction. So to get rid of a fraction, instead of dividing, so we don't divide fractions, we don't like that, we're going to multiply by its reciprocal. So we take this fraction, whatever it is, and we're going to flip it over. So if we flip it, it becomes 2 over 1, which is just 2, so times 2. And we're going to do that to each side of our equation. So 2 times 1/2 gives us 1, so this will just be x. 3 times 2 is 6. X is alone, so we have our final answer. So we would call each of those one-step equations because they're very simple to solve. So now we're going to make it a little bit more challenging. So we have 2-step equations. So again, when we start undoing, we always start with adding and subtracting. So again, we're trying to get this x by itself. So that means to start with, we have to subtract the 2 over. So now we have 3x equals, and then 11 minus 2 is 9. And then now, since it's multiplication, to undo that, we have to divide. So we divide both sides by 3. So now we have x equals, and then 9 divided by 3 is 3. So 3 would be our final answer for this problem. Same thing for the next one. We're trying to get x by itself, so since we have this subtraction, we need to get rid of that first. So we're going to add 1 to each side. So 1/3 x equals, and then 9 plus 1 is 10. So since we're dealing with a fraction, we're going to multiply by its reciprocal, so we're flipping this over. So 1 over 3, when we flip it, becomes 3 over 1. So we don't need to worry about writing it over 1, so that's just the same as 3. And then we also multiply this side by 3. So now we have x equals, and then 10 times 3 is 30. So that would be our final answer for that problem. So again, starting with our addition here, so we have to undo that first. So minus 13 to each side. So negative 2x equals 18 minus 13 is 5. And then we have to divide by negative 2 to each side. Now notice for this one that 5 does not divide by 2 evenly. So we're not going to use decimals. Okay? We should never be using decimals for any of these problems unless it gives you a decimal in your original problem. Okay? So we are going to leave them as fractions. So we're just going to simplify this fraction as much as we can. So the only thing that we can do to simplify is move this negative up to the numerator. So our final answer is going to be x equals negative 5 halves. All right, continuing, a little bit more challenging here. So now we have an x on each side of our equation. So when that happens, we have to get our x's on one side and our numbers on the other. Okay? So I'm going to do this kind of one step at a time. So I'm going to start by getting my x's on the same side. And I would like to try to leave them positive if possible. So I'm going to move the 2x over to this side. So since we're moving it across the equal sign, we have to do the opposite. So we're going to subtract. So now 7x minus 2x is 5x. We still have our plus 3. And then this cancels out. So it is equal to a minus 12. So make sure you don't lose that subtraction sign. So now since x is on the left, that means I'm putting my numbers on the right. So the next step is to move the 3 over by subtracting it. So again, anytime you're going across an equal sign, you have to do the opposite operation. So now we have 5x equals, and then negative 12 minus 3 is going to be negative 15. Then we can divide. So now we have x equals, and then negative 15 divided by 5 is negative 3. All right, so next problem, it looks like we have a group. So that means that usually the easiest approach is to get rid of our grouping symbol by distributing that number in. So if we do that, we will end up with 2x minus 6 plus 6 equals 20. And then we want to combine like terms on this side. So if we combine our numbers together, negative 6 plus 6 is 0, so it works out nicely. They're going to cancel each other out. That does not happen every single time, but it does happen in this case. So now we have 2x equals 20, and we can divide next. So x equals 10. Final answer. All right, continuing. Number 9 looks like we have grouping symbols on both sides of our equal sign. So let's start by distributing first on each side. So we're allowed to do that at the same time. So 6 times x is 6x. 6 times negative 2 is negative 12. 2 times 9 is 18. 2 times negative 2x is negative 4x. So now just like up in problem 7, we have an x on each side of our equal sign. So that means that we want to put our x's on one side, numbers on the other. So again, we're moving things across this equal sign. So we have to undo them when we do that. We can't just combine as is. So now I'm going to move my 4x over to the left side by adding it, since it's subtraction. So now we have 10x minus 12 equals 18. So my next step is to move the 12 over, so we have to do that by adding. There's some out of space here. So 10x, got rid of our 12, so equals 18 plus 12 is 30. And then now we can divide. So x will be equal to 30 divided by 10 is 3. Final answer. All right, last problem. So again, we have this grouping symbol. So that means that we need to distribute to start with. So we have 4x plus, and then 4 times 9 is 36, equals negative 3x plus 12. Again, x is on each side, so we have to do what we were doing before. And this time, I'm going to actually do are rearranging in the same step. So that's allowed if you can do that. So I'm going to move my 3x over to the left. So that means that we have to add it. And then I'm going to move my 36 right away too. So since it's positive here, that means that we need to subtract it on each side. Okay, so what's happening right now, if I just kind of go by columns, 4x plus 3x is 7x. That's going to cancel, so I don't need to rewrite it. Equals, and then that cancels, so again, I don't need to rewrite that. And then 12 minus 36 is going to be negative 24. And then we need to divide. So divide by 7. So again, when I'm looking at that, I have to decide if 7 divides into 24 evenly, and it doesn't. So that means that we are just simplifying our fraction, and there's nothing more that we can do to simplify this. So our final answer is going to be x equals negative 24 sevenths. Make sure too when you're doing this that you always circle your final answer so that it's easy to find.